Hey everyone, and welcome back to Tech Talk Central. I'm Nathan, and with me as always is Sarah. Today we're diving into a home theater debate, one that we know a lot of you guys out there are facing, picking between the Samsung HW-B750D and the Vizio Elevate SE soundbars.
Yeah, you've got two really popular sound bars here, both of them promising that cinematic audio, but they go about it in pretty different ways. It's like the classic saying, different strokes for different
For
folks.
sure. Okay, so let's break this down. From what I saw in the research you sent over, it seems like the Samsung HW-B750D, it's all about that classic 5.1 surround sound setup. So you've got the center channel, side speakers, and of course a subwoofer for that deep bass. Plus, it also have those wireless rear speakers to really give you that surround sound feel.
Right, and that's where we see one of the first key differences. So while the Samsung's rear speakers are wireless, they still need to connect to a wired subwoofer. So you will have some cables to think about, but it's still a lot less clutter than a fully wired system would be.
Okay, so wireless, but not completely cable-free. Got it. Now, the Vizio Elevate SE, it's a little more, how do I put this, extra with its 5.1.2 channel setup. So that means on top of that standard 5.1 configuration, it has two additional height speakers.
And those height speakers, that's where the Vizio is really trying to set itself apart. So these speakers, they actually physically rotate upwards when they detect Dolby Atmos or DTS.X content. Vizio's whole goal with this is to bounce the sound off your ceiling, to create that overhead audio effect that those immersive formats are known for.
So that's literally the Elevate part of the Elevate SE. The speakers actually elevate to point at the ceiling. That's a cool concept. But does it actually live up to all the hype?
So one of the customer reviews that you sent me mentioned that the Atmos implementation, while they could definitely notice it, it wasn't as dramatic as they were expecting. This could be for a few reasons. Maybe the room acoustics just weren't ideal for this kind of setup. Or maybe they just had their expectations set a little too high.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think we often get caught up in the marketing hype, but then the real experience can vary. It depends on your individual setup and, of course, your personal preferences.
Exactly. And that leads us to another big difference between these two soundbars: how they approach control and customization. So the Samsung, it sticks to a pretty traditional approach with a physical remote, plug and play. You know, simple as that.
But then the Vizio,
Yeah.
they go all in on the tech side of things. No traditional remote here. You're relying on their mobile app for basically everything.
Yeah. Which can be good or bad.
Right.
So for tech-savvy users, people who love to tinker and fine-tune things, the Vizio app gives you a ton of control over the EQ settings, sound modes, even LED lights on the soundbar. But if you're someone who just wants to quickly turn the volume up or down, then having to fumble with an app might feel like a pain.
Right. So one soundbar is going with that old school approach, and the other one's embracing the whole app-controlled future. Now, what about the wireless capabilities? We talked about the Samsung setup. What about the Vizio?
The Vizio takes a slightly different approach. The subwoofer connects wirelessly to the soundbar, but the rear speakers need to be wired to the subwoofer.
Oh, wow. So it's almost like they flipped the script. Samsung has the wireless rear speakers connected to a wired subwoofer.
Hmm.
Vizio has the wireless subwoofer, but wired rear speakers.
Yeah. And I think this really shows a key difference in their design philosophies. So the Samsung seems to be prioritizing a more traditional surround sound setup, where that subwoofer is usually placed near the front of the room. The Vizio, with its wireless subwoofer, gives you more flexibility in where you put the subwoofer, which can be really helpful for optimizing that bass response in different room layouts.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So both systems have their wireless quirks.
Yeah.
But they're definitely a big improvement over a totally wired system. Now let's talk a little bit more about Dolby Atmos and DTS:X. It seems like everyone's talking about these immersive audio formats, but what do they actually do?
Okay, so imagine you're watching a movie and there's a helicopter flying overhead. With traditional surround sound, you would hear the sound coming from the speakers around you. But with Dolby Atmos, it can actually make it sound like that helicopter is truly above you. It adds this whole vertical dimension to the soundstage. So how it does this, it treats each sound as its own individual object. And that object can be placed anywhere in a 3D space. Then your soundbar uses algorithms to figure out how to reproduce those sounds using the speakers that you have.
So it's not just about having more speakers, it's about how the sound is processed
Yeah.
and positioned within that virtual space. That's pretty cool. But does it actually make a big difference in how it sounds?
It can. Like, imagine you're playing a video game, and you can pinpoint exactly where your enemies are, based on their footsteps or gunfire. Or you're watching a nature documentary, and you feel like you're right in the middle of the rainforest, surrounded by all the sounds of the birds and the insects. These immersive audio formats are really good at adding that depth and realism to those kinds of experiences.
Okay, I'm starting to see why everyone is so excited about this Dolby Atmos. It's not just about making things louder. It's about creating a more immersive and believable soundscape.
Exactly. DTSX works in a similar way, even though the technical details are a little different. The important thing to remember is that both Dolby Atmos and DTSX are trying to create a more realistic and engaging audio experience by placing sounds more precisely all around you.
That's really fascinating. But before we get too lost in the technical stuff, let's get back to our two soundbars. We know both the Samsung HW-B750D and the Vizio Elevate SE support Dolby Atmos and DTSX, but what about their overall sound quality?
Okay, so we don't have any direct side-by-side audio comparisons, but those customer reviews you gave me, they have some interesting insights. One Samsung reviewer specifically talked about feeling completely surrounded by the sound, which makes it seem like the HW-B750D does a really good job of creating a cohesive and immersive soundstage.
And for the Vizio, there was that reviewer who said they needed to adjust the equalizer settings in the app to get the sound just right. This could mean that the Elevate SE is more sensitive to room acoustics, and it might need a little more fine-tuning to get the best results.
Yeah, that's a great point. It seems like the Vizio gives you more control, but it might take a little more effort to dial it in perfectly. But the Samsung, on the other hand, seems to be more plug and play, with really great sound right out of the box.
So it's a trade-off. Do you want simplicity and ease of use, or are you willing to spend some time tweaking the settings to get that perfect sound you're looking for?
Yeah, that's the question. I think it really comes down to your personal preferences and how comfortable you are with tech. Some people might find the Vizio's app control to be really useful, while others might just see it as an extra step.
I think you hit the nail on the head there. There's no one perfect answer when it comes to soundbars. It's all about finding what works for you and how you're going to use it.
Definitely. And speaking of what works for you, we can't forget about the price. When we were looking at this stuff, the Vizio Elevate SE was listed at $399, but prices can change. So to find the latest prices and deals, make sure to check out the links down in the description below.
Good point. We'll make sure to keep those links updated for you. Now, before we wrap up, I want to circle back to those customer reviews for a sec. Remember that Samsung reviewer who talked about feeling completely immersed in the sound? I think that says a lot about how effective their 5.1 setup is.
Yeah, it does. And it brings up something we haven't really talked about. How important the center channel is in a soundbar. That center channel, it's responsible for making sure the dialogue is clear, which is so important for movies and TV shows. And based on that review, it sounds like the Samsung HW-B750D really nails it in that area.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Having clear dialogue can make or break the whole viewing experience. You don't want to have to keep rewinding because you can't understand what the characters are saying.
Exactly. And while we don't have a similar story for the Vizio, the fact that a reviewer mentioned having to adjust the EQ to get the best sound, that could mean that the Elevate SE gives you more options for customizing the sound, including the dialogue clarity.
So both soundbars probably have really good dialogue clarity, but the Vizio might give you more control over how it sounds.
Right. And that takes us back to that main difference we've been talking about. The Samsung is all about simplicity and ease of use, while the Vizio focuses more on customization and control.
I'm starting to think of them as the set it and forget it soundbar versus the tweak it to perfection soundbar.
I like that.
And at the end of the day, the best choice for you really depends on what you're looking for in a soundbar.
Couldn't said it better myself. Yeah.
Well, everyone, I think that just about wraps up our deep dive into the Samsung HW-B750D and the Vizio Elevate SE. Hope this comparison was helpful.
Yeah. And if you enjoyed it, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our future deep dives. We've got a lot more exciting stuff coming your way.
We'll be back next week, breaking down all the latest gadgets and gizmos so you can make the best choices about all the tech that matters to you. Thanks for joining us. And until next time, happy listening